And they'll take the run on 16 more events from the likely speed. Going on next, number 27, Tidal Sump, Tidal Sump, followed by Otter,
Chepstow, as every racegoer knows, is synonymous with the Welsh Grand National. But few of them would know that directly beneath the racecourse lies one of the most extraordinary caves in Britain. According to legend, the lost manuscripts of Shakespeare were buried beside the River Wye. It was while seeking these that local electrician George Gardiner stumbled across a cave entrance in the woodland beside the river.
Well, I've known about this hole ever since, as about a youngster, but never realised that it had cave-in potential.
To find out whether this was indeed the hiding place of the manuscripts, he was forced to seek the assistance of local cavers. However, Dave Parker was the only one to take up the challenge.
I'd seen a cave above, small cave on a folly walk, the old Valentine Morris folly walk called Giant's Cave, and I'd never got down to going along the river, and obviously not, apart from locals like George, no other caver had been along there either, it seems.
But the magnitude of the oversight would only be understood in retrospect.
We're in here, David. The otters used to live here, more or less, as a young in here, look, and bring fish bones and things and fish onto those outer ledges.
It was fairly typical of a lot of entrances that don't go very far in, because there's a lot of entrances like this along the Wye, Simonjat area, which partly mines, partly natural, starting like a base of a cliff, bit of an entrance, but there was a strong draft in this one, though. That was the difference, a very strong draft. It's cold.
It is cold in there, isn't it?
With a draft. You can always tell a system by the strength of draft coming out of there, I maintain.
Okay. Yeah.
And there had to be a cave behind that to me.
And they disappeared.
Knowing it was one thing, getting through to it was quite another. Immediately behind the entrance, a series of contorted passages led through to a low, tight squeeze. When Dave got there, he could see through to a black opening beyond. Shunned by friends who thought major caves were unlikely to develop in the massively bedded limestone of the Wye Valley, Dave embarked on 4 years of solitary and often painful labour as he worked to enlarge the passage. The Norman castle of Chepstow is seated on dolomite rock, a form of limestone not previously associated with caves. But Dave was to be proved right in the end. After 4 years, the caving establishment finally realized that despite the nature of the rock, Dave Parker might be onto something. With their help, the breakthrough came on the 14th of September 1974.
Fingers. Okay there.
The impassable squeeze which had thwarted Dave for 4 years was reduced in seconds to a pile of rubble by the simple expedient of a small quantity of dynamite.
I have confident belief that there's systems in limestone all over the Forest of Dean, but breaking through into them is a different matter, so that there was great surprise in the sense when we did break through and got such a footage passage, 1,000 feet in that first breakthrough. Normally it's 80 feet, another 80 feet, another 20 feet, and it goes on like that for years. Now we broke through relatively quickly on this system.
Beyond the initial squeeze lay a complex series of passages, low rifts and pools. On that first trip into Otter Hole, Dave was accompanied by 2 men who were to play a major role in the subsequent exploration of the cave. One was Phil Schwartz, a part-time miner and local metal worker. The other, with a long record of international caving achievement, was John Elliott.
We were very, very excited just to be moving forward in a cave that was more than a few feet long, because there was nothing in the area at all, so every foot forward was massive progress, really.
The way on was always there, but never easy. Complicated rifts and joints were followed by awkward crawls and squeezes.
Yeah, we got over. Perhaps you liked that one.
Several characteristics marked the cave out as quite different from the general pattern. Not least of these was the mud, of a consistency and quantity unknown in any other British cave. Eventually, the passage brought them to a muddy incline and the seeming conclusion of their exploration. John Elliott takes up the story.
We were stopped by a deep pool, which appeared to be a sump and was probably the end of the cave. However, we weren't disappointed because we had 1,000 feet of cave, which was the longest in the area, in fact the only known cave in the area. So what we needed to know now was how long the cave was and which direction it travelled, and a few photographs to show what we'd found. So the next thing was to bring a team in to survey the cave and find out what our next stage of exploration would be.
The survey team was led by Phil Schwartz. He was accompanied by Ian Standing, a local dentist. The third member of the party was a girl, also an experienced caver, Diane Court.
When we got to the first place where you can stand up after all the bedding plane crawls, we were standing there looking around, and we were enthusiastically telling Ian about what happened after that and how much bigger it got and how exciting it all was. And we heard a very strange sound, and there was this tremendous gurgling, rushing sound, and we looked down at the floor and we could see water pouring in around all the rocks and boulders. And we watched one particular rock and we could actually see the water level rising on it and coming up at quite a fast rate. So we just looked at each other and we knew we had to get out fast. So we turned round and started making our way out through all the crawls. And we didn't really know whether we would have time to make it because of the rate in which the water was rising.
Hold on a sec. Are you still going? No. Keep going. Keep going. still going, Phil? Yeah. Don't you get boy enough to be head of the water.
And I can remember thinking at that point, oh crumbs, this is it. This is what it's going to be like to drown. I'm not going to get out of here.
Okay, come in, please.
I was really quite scared, but I was determined I was going to try and get out. I wasn't just going to stay there. So I pushed forward again, and by then Ian had managed to turn around and get out. So I was able to go on through and slide out and climb up. And then we breathed a sigh of relief because we knew that we were above the water level at that point because we climbed on out to the entrance. Then when we got outside and stood on the bank, we looked out at the river, and that was not much below our feet, and it really dawned on me then just what had happened, that the tide had risen to such a height that it had come in and flooded the cave. And I think that was when I felt most scared, really, seeing this great mass of black water flowing so close to the entrance.
Nowhere else in Britain is the tidal range as great as in the upper reaches of the Severn estuary. Otter Hole's unique feature is that its resurgence, the point where its underground stream re-emerges at the surface, lies between the high and low tide marks. Situated on the mud banks of the River Wye, some 100 meters downstream of the cave entrance, the resurgence is only exposed when the tide is low. The stream, which carries the water from the sump to the resurgence, takes a different route to that which can be followed by cavers. At low tide, it flows down gradient from the sump to the river. As the tide rises, the resurgence is covered, and the flow from the sump to the river is halted. Under the increasing pressure of the rising tide, the flow is reversed, and the river water is pumped back through the sump, flooding the cave. The day the survey team went in coincided with the highest tide for over 100 years. It nearly cost them their lives.
Well, we now understood that at very high tides it was best not to be anywhere near the cave, and so we started planning our trips much more carefully. With this in mind, we reached the sump to try and trace the draft, which was at the entrance of the cave and had to emit from somewhere. We'd noticed the eye hole on a previous trip, and I wanted to swim across and have a better look at it. I was able to climb up into it and slide through, dropping back into the water beyond. I felt also the powerful draft coming through it, so we'd now found our draft. However, a few yards on, a large pile of boulders confronted us, and this proved very difficult to get over. We lassoed some boulders high up and pulled a ladder up, and in actual fact we got past this, but it caused us a lot of problems, and eventually we had to replace it with an iron ladder. Bringing equipment like ladders into the cave was extremely difficult because the entrance series is just so small that everything is a struggle to bring in, and it had to be brought in short sections just so that it would bend.
Okay, below.
If a man's body wouldn't bend, you'd never get into the cave at all.
Once at the top of the ladder, the cavers are safe beyond the reach of the sump's tidal range. It was the discovery of the eye hole that had opened the way for further development. Closed twice daily by the rising tide, this is the feature that baffled the cave's early explorers. It is also the reason for another of Otter Hole's strange characteristics, the fact that the draft depends upon the state of the tide. Having negotiated this obstacle, the effort of bringing in and installing an iron ladder was amply rewarded by the discoveries that were to follow. Beyond the sump and the ladder, an awkward traverse above a yawning rift proved to be the only way on. The rift led them to the object of every caver's dreams.
Once we'd passed the choke and dropped down into the stream, we were very, very elated, because this is what we'd really been wanting to find. This is what the whole expedition was about, finding an underground river. We were able to follow this for 1,500 feet. It was fabulous. It was just what we'd been after. We knew now that this was a master cave, a system that drained the whole area because of its size, and that lots of different streams would unite and flow down it. Our job now was to try to follow these back to the surface to make perhaps a continuous system right through from the lower part of the hill right up onto the hill itself. Throughout the stream we meet large piles of boulders. The cave is formed in dolomite rock, which is very, very fractured, and there is always rock falls. However, we were lucky that although sometimes the cave looked like it had stopped, we were always managed to find a way on.
Tricky climb, yeah?
The second boulder choke proved more of an obstacle and is much nastier, but again, we were lucky to be able to find a reasonable route through it.
Don't follow too close, fella, or I shall kick you. Oh, that's a tight bit, that is. Tight and awkward.
Well, we arrived up these boulders and were confronted by a vertical drop which we had no way of descending with us at that time, but we were very excited because the way on was obvious down a huge passage at the end of which we could hear the stream running, so that we knew we were onto a very good route. However, we had to go back because we had no tackle, and unfortunately it was several weeks later, because the weather was extremely unkind to us and floods hit the country and the water levels rose, so it was several weeks before we were able to get back and arrive at the same spot again and descend it. Vertical drops in caves are always a danger, so you always take a fair amount of care on ladders and use a rope to safeguard your descent and hope there's no large boulders going to be dislodged as you go down. Usually we clear anything that looks particularly dangerous. The Otter hole ladder pitch in particular was very dangerous because it went down an overhanging pile of boulders which always looks in a fearful state of collapse.
Nearly down.
And this makes it objectively quite a dangerous place.
Foot out. Okay, down. It's not far, it's gone. It's not far. Do you have to sweat? I can't remember. Oh, it's getting deeper. Oh my God.
Towards the end of the cave, as we followed the stream, the roof became lower and lower, and your heart sinks because you've got a feeling you know what's coming, and eventually, of course, it did come. The roof met the water, and we knew that's it, really. We can pack up and go home.
Oh, here we are. Oh yeah, you can feel it going under. You can feel air, but it's a tight little dive.
We'd now explored 2,300 feet of very nice cave, but unfortunately we were stopped now by a final sump, and this really was the end for us, but at least it gave us time to take stock of what we'd found, and this was very good indeed. To explore on, we'd need divers, and this we set about arranging. Meanwhile, however, the one remaining puzzle was, of course, where was the draft going? So while parties were bringing the divers in, we set out searching high and low for the draft. Eventually, using candles and watching the smoke from it, we found the draft going up vertically through boulders. We dug up through these boulders, following the draft, and came into a series of chambers. This was very, very exciting because it meant that there was some upper development. The stream hadn't just followed the one course, but that there were abandoned chambers, and this was immensely exciting. It's showing that there could be much more to the cave than we even suspected. It is common to have older development above. Obviously, as the cave cuts down through the rock, the water's at the lowest point, and anything that's left behind at a previous time is going to be higher. So yes, we tend to climb and look for higher routes, often to bypass sumps. We were exploring these sort of random series of rifts and chambers, but I don't think we really believed it was going to go an awful long way. It was probably an inlet. We did think we may find a few odd chambers that had been developed in that area.
As long as there was a draft to guide the way, there was always the possibility of new discoveries.
Around Christmas '75, several of us were digging in a sandy crawl, following a draft. Eventually we came upon some boulders, and during one trip down we moved away a few boulders, and there was a black space beyond. Immediately we scrabbled through, and suddenly the cave got a whole lot bigger, and formations started appearing, and the further we went along this huge passage, the formations got better and better.
As we got to this corner where the passage grew perhaps 30 feet wide and 20 feet high, the formations were huge. We were red-faced and literally hoarse from the excitement of shouting, and 6 of us galloped down this passage before we got to some even more incredible formations. They were certainly then the best we'd ever seen in Britain, a forest of huge stalagmites leading upwards towards a ceiling where other stalagmites hang down.
To be the first to set foot in the incredible Hall of 30 was the fulfillment of the caver's dreams.
The minute we walked into it, we realised that there was nothing like it in the country. It was a unique cavern.
It's something cavers dream about, and many cavers spend hours and hours digging and never getting anywhere, getting disappointed, giving up, and just now and again you have a major discovery, and these are so few and far between, especially in the British Isles. It's really something if you're the person involved.
The discovery rates is a high spot in my life, caving-wise, and caving is my life, really. So just an immense privilege to be able to be in on the exploration.
The secrets that Otter Hole has already yielded were not easily won. So, what remains to be discovered?
he's open there. If I get so far down, you can Okay, hang on there, Barry, and I'll give you a hand with the drill.
Yeah, okay, Gladys.
Okay, take it. One more.
Okay. Come on, Nick.
The entrance series and the Tidal Sump were the gateway to Otter Hole. After the discovery of the streamway, the explorers followed the draft upwards to break into the extension and the magnificent Hall of 30. Despite a temporary halt, a way on was soon found which led rapidly to the known end of the cave. Today, a two-pronged assault is mounted. One of the surface streams which sink to the west is known to connect with the cave. Lying some 200 feet directly beneath the finishing straight of Chepstow racecourse, the orientation of the Hall of 30 is towards the west, along the road which leads to the hamlet of Itton. Here, a mile and a half from the racecourse, and shielded behind an innocent-looking clump of trees, one of the streams which feeds the subterranean river of Otter Hole sinks into the fissures of the limestone rock. It is streams such as this which, over millennia, have sculpted out the cave's awesome chambers.
All right. Okay, yeah. You manage this still right, okay? Yeah, hang on.
The surface streams constantly find new ways through the limestone into the cave. This means that the point where the stream enters the cave is always the least developed part of the system. The rock may be no more eroded than simply to allow the passage of the water. Because of this, when cavers wish to follow a surface stream down into the system, they must make use of whatever techniques prove necessary, however extreme these may appear.
We can have the air on now, Barry.
Okay. Roger. Hi, Barry.
Since they started work on the sink at Itton, the cavers have used 300 pounds of explosives to dig out 800 feet of passage. In the process, they have shifted 500 tons of rock.
Ripple cables. Good stuff, this.
Meanwhile, the main effort is directed to following the same inlet stream back to the surface from within the cave. Since the known end of the cave is now some 2 miles from the entrance, exploration can only be pushed ahead from a forward base camp deep within the cave. The equipment needed for this exercise includes an underground telephone and a 2-kilowatt generator weighing 170 pounds. Paul Taylor is the organizer of this feat of logistics. Underground, the group will be led by John Elliott. Part-time teacher Claire Bishop joins the exploration team, as also does Phil Schwartz. Their aim is to connect with the drilling team at Itten via the dig at the end of the cave.
Well, they did wonders.
Further exploration is impossible without an underground camp, since it now takes 10 hours to carry equipment from the entrance to the point where the dig will take place. With the help of a 35-strong support party, a small group, including the film crew, will be able to camp below ground and work at the far end of the cave.
That's what it was. Levitation.
For Paul Taylor, the challenge is tremendous.
The end of the cave holds very great potential. We could have miles and miles of passage yet to come. And what we've seen may be nothing to compare to what is, or could be, there to be found. The prospects at the far end are enormous. There is no doubt that it will go a lot further, mainly due to the water, which sinks up at Itten 1.5 miles away and 400 feet higher, enters the cave at that point, so we know there is a direct connection.
To sustain the underground camp, it is necessary to transport into the cave 30 loads of food and a further 50 loads of equipment. It takes 8 hours to ferry each load as far as the campsite, though without doubt the worst section is that between the entrance and the Tidal Sump.
Okay, Phil.
Every time the tide floods this part of the cave, it brings with it mud from the River Wye. It is this tidal mud that has made Otter Hole notorious among cavers throughout Britain.
The entrance series mud crawls are renowned throughout the country for being terrible. They are full of liquid mud which has been spread everywhere. They're very low. Carrying loads are a terrible struggle because you can hardly lift them up. They stick in the mud for a start. It's just a shattering experience. There are quite a few caves with long crawls. I don't think there's anything so muddy with tidal mud in it. I think the mud takes some beating anywhere. I think combined with the cave itself, it must make one of the most tiring trips, I think, in the country. When you pack anything to go into Otter Hole, because the water is salt water, it's got to be protected particularly well. It's best not even to get a camera out in the entrance tidal section if you can help it. Everything has got to be completely waterproof. It's just a big nightmare transferring anything through this section of cave.
I'll set the phone up to him.
Effective communications with the surface are vital to ensure that the complex and extended operation below ground continues to run smoothly. A telephone link between the cave entrance and the underground campsite is set up and manned 24 hours a day while the exploration team is inside.
Yeah, that's all right.
Beyond the entrance series, the cavers reach the Tidal Sump. Now that it is summer, this obstacle seems to belie its true nature. It appears to be a simple arch of rock spanning a shallow pool. During winter, the tidal sump is passable only via the eye hole, and then only when the tide is low and there has been little rain. In summer, the rising tides will close the sump as surely as those of winter. But in summer there is less rain, and so less stream water to drain through the system. When the tide falls, the sump drains completely, revealing an arch beneath the eye hole. Squeezing through the arch is awkward, but a lot easier than climbing through the eye hole above.
That's me.
Climbing ready.
Climbing.
Claire Bishop was first introduced to the world of caving after John Elliott came to build an extension to her house.
I'm not a person who likes to sit still. I like to do energetic things. And when I started caving, I found that this suited me. I've got 4 children. I've taken my husband caving twice. He just has no interest in it at all. I think he thinks I'm a bit crazy, but he accepts the fact that I enjoy doing it, and puts no problems in my way if I want to go.
Give me the box, then.
A trip into the far reaches of Otter Hole, particularly one that involves ferrying large quantities of equipment, is among the most arduous caving outings that can be made in Britain. The nature of the cave itself is very demanding, both in terms of its length and the difficulty of the terrain to be crossed. There are few places in the entire cave where it is possible to walk upright on an even floor. As the hours pass, the weight and awkwardness of the loads, the low, knee-tearing crawls, and the treacherous, mud-encrusted boulders take their toll.
Incredible.
After 8 hours in the cave, it is with no small sense of relief that the team approaches the campsite.
No. There they are. Below surface, Steve.
Hello, Steve. We've just arrived at the camp. Pretty tired, and we're going to have a bite to eat and then be bedding down for the night.
While they shed wet and dirty caving kit for the welcome warmth of dry clothes, one of the tasks of the surface crew is to ensure that the generator at the entrance keeps going. From there, a power line to the underground camp enables both the explorers and the film crew to keep their headlamps and lighting batteries charged.
You've just showered me with mud. Give it a shower. Socks. God, I'm sweating. Yeah, it's a grim trap. God.
They're pretty near to us. Where about on the survey there? Below us. They're coming that far.
To the amazement of the off-duty members of the surface team, the cave survey shows their colleagues to be directly beneath the pub. But for those below ground, the pub may as well be a light year away.
We get a long tube and send it down to the floor.
We could do about this anyway, couldn't we?
Yeah, we're right in that place.
Oh, you're in quick there.
In the artificial dawn of a man-made light, the explorers leave camp for the end of the cave.
How far to the end now, John?
Oh, another 2,500 feet, yeah, mate.
Fair way.
Still moving well.
To get there, they must first pass through Straw Chamber.
It was absolutely awe-inspiring to walk into, and it's got calcite all over the floor, hanging straws from the ceiling, big pillars of calcite around the edges. The whole place is just an incredible cascade of beauty. straw chamber got its name because of the large cluster of straw stalactites that hang down from the roof. They are very, very fragile, and some of them were up to 12 feet long. They're only 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and they're hollow, just like straws that you drink out of. They are very, very delicate and fragile and beautiful.
The translucent splendor of straw chamber behind them, a gently ascending tunnel with a red calcite floor leads them to their objective, the boulder-choked end of the passage. If they can find a way through the mass of unstable boulders, they may be able to gain access to the 1.5 miles of cave that must lie between here and the point where the stream sinks at Itten.
Feel any draft?
Just a bit. Not all right. It's a long.
If the link can be made, a tantalizing possibility emerges, that of following the stream for its entire length, an underground trip from Itten to the Wye.
You can't hear anything beyond water.
No, nothing, mate. Nothing.
However remote the possibility, it is the knowledge that one day someone will find a way that spurs them on. Paul Taylor.
You always hope that you're going to be the person that breaks through that final squeeze and finds miles and miles of big passages full of big formations.
Good teamwork is essential to spread the workload and manhandle the boulders.
Hopefully, you know, this will happen. I don't think it happens that many times in people's lives, and even just finding 50 or 60 feet of cave, to know that you're the first person that's ever been in there, in the whole world, is quite something.
In the cramped, wet conditions of the dig, prizing rocks from the mass with a jemmy held at arm's length, Paul finds the task both strenuous and exhausting.
Paul. Okay, let's get this one. All right. So I drop it on your hand. Okay, good one.
Okay.
Some of these are heavy.
Yeah, this one's got a big.
Ten hours later, the digging team make their way back to the camp where Paul reports back to the surface.
Okay, Steve, it's 17:30 now. We'd like you to keep the generator running all the time and give us a call 0130 hours. We're just bedding down now, and we shall then, when we've had a good night's sleep, be setting off then to the end of the cave to have a look, see what we can do down there. So, if everybody's ready.
All right. Yeah.
Lights out now, Chuck.
Right, what time are we getting up?
1:30, John.
Right, coffee for Mole.
One of the problems, of course, with having all these people in the cave was what did we do with all the rubbish? And we didn't leave anything in the cave which wasn't part of the cave beforehand.
Oh, so another one ready soon.
We cut all the tin cans and everything, we shredded all those up, and plastic containers and everything were all cut up so that we could pack them all away into smaller containers and bring out.
Even human waste had to be kept in ammunition tins and transported carefully out of the cave, as we didn't want to leave any sort of so-called litter in there at all.
After yet another night below ground, the team retraced their steps through Straw Chamber to the end of the cave.
Look like it's falling in, man.
Yes. Water levels dropped considerably, haven't they? I think it has, yes.
Back at the dig, Paul squeezes down into the pile of loose rock.
Not bad. It's a bit of a tight squeeze.
Yeah. Can you get through?
I think I might be able to get through with my lamp off.
Take it easy.
It was a bit dicey and a bit tight in places, squeezing between the boulders. And you've obviously got to be very careful crawling about in these boulders in case one moves and starts a sort of snowball effect and they all start moving. But once I'd got in about 10 or 15 feet, I could then hear water running beyond, so of course this egged me on a bit.
Drafting.
Yeah, I can feel the draft here. It's cold.
We're right against this right-hand wall.
Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah, it's your only safe way.
I came to a low arch. I could see, passage beyond, but the rock arch was just too small without work on it to be able to get through. So it was really very, at the time, very frustrating.
How you going then, Paul?
Oh, not too bad really. It was a tight squeeze, had to have my lamp off. And 10, 15 foot of passage. And turns off to the right, following the right-hand wall, and it goes off to the right. Low section, we'll probably have to use a bit of bang on it. But it's nice and sort of boomy beyond, and you can hear the stream in the distance, and it's a good draft.
Well, it's very exciting that we've just got through the boulder choke in such a quick time, and usually with a dig of this sort it can take many, many weeks, but we have actually, apart from a low arch, we are nearly through into what lies beyond. Next time we will have to bring explosives and blow this point, but that will then lead us into the stream that we can hear beyond, and on, hopefully, upwards towards Itton and the sinks that lie at the top of the hill. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and we must go out tomorrow, but as soon as possible we will be back and push on with the dig.
The camp is over. The team leaves for the surface. At the entrance, the support team has a surprise in store for the returning party.
Oh, beer. Don't believe it. Lovely. Do with a drink? Yeah, very good. Oh my goodness. Ah, very nice. Well, we enjoyed that. Sorry to be out.
4 weeks later, the explorers returned. Using explosives, they forced a way through the rock arch. Beyond, a low crawl dropped into a seemingly impassable pool. But by diving, they reached a new passage and followed it for 300 feet.
About 110 hours.
110.
The quest goes on.
We will not stop unless physically it's not possible to go on. So whatever we have to go through, to get on, we will do, and we'll take through what we need to do it. So nothing will stop us.